Good evening, and welcome to the regularly scheduled City Council meeting of Clawson on March 5th. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Dear God, thank you for the gift of life and the opportunity to serve the people of our city. Help us to act with character and conviction. Help us to listen with understanding and goodwill. Help us to speak with charity and restraint. Give us a spirit of service. Remind us that we are stewards of your authority. Guide us to be the leaders your people need. And help us see the humanity and dignity of those who disagree with us and to treat all persons, no matter how weak or poor, with the reverence your creation deserves. And finally, Father, renew us with the strength of your presence and the joy of helping to build a prosperous community. We ask this as your sons and daughters, confident in your goodness and love. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Woolley,
Here.
Councilmember Ayers,
Here.
Councilmember Milan,
Here.
Councilmember Moffett,
Here.
Councilmember Albrecht.
Here.
The first item on the agenda is consideration of approving the consent agenda. What's considered in the consent agenda this week is the minutes of the regularly city council meeting held on Tuesday, February 29th, the reappointment of Jim Leanhouse to the Parks and Rec Board for a term to expire May 1st, 2020, reappointment of Norm Valenti to the Parks and Rec Board for a term to expire May 1st of 2020, reappointment of Valerie Valenti to the Parks and Rec Board for a term to expire May 1st, 2020, approving the 2018-2019 fiscal year budget amendments as presented.
Madam Mayor, I move the consent agenda be approved as listed.
Support.
Are there any questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Councilmember Ayers,
Yes.
Councilmember Milan,
Yes.
Councilmember Moffett,
Yes.
Councilmember Albrecht,
Yes.
Mayor Woolley.
Yes. And the motion carries. The next item on the agenda is consideration of approving the special needs sign policy. And Mr. Kingsept, I understand you're going to speak to this.
Yes, I am, Madam Mayor, members of the council. We tried to bifurcate this and not present the ordinance to you because the significant part of the special needs sign policy is on the next to the last, the text page, and it's number A, where the Traffic Safety Board, when they consider special needs requests, they have to establish a standard on why they deny it. And the reason for that is essentially the fact, and I highlighted it on the document, the fact that any applicant who comes before them, let's say the police department does not agree to the applicant on a special needs, they have a right to come forward themselves. And so if the relief is denied, and even if the police bring it and it's denied by the Traffic and Safety Board, there has to be a legitimate reason and basis for it because it's an administrative hearing. And that person, if they feel aggrieved, has a right to appeal to you. So the appeal is limited based on the rationale. So they have to really state the rationale, and then they have to show that it was improper, incorrect, or whatever, or the procedure was improper. So that standard is very important to this policy. So we need you to approve the policy first, here you go, so we can then do the ordinance, and the ordinance also tracks somewhat the policy by the standard that we have in it as well. But we want everyone to know what the standard is, what the policy is, and so forth. This is not opening the door to a number of special needs, but it is providing an opportunity where warranted. The city can put up a sign. The sign is not permanent. It's as long as the individual who's in that area has the affliction or the handicap or whatever that justifies the sign. Once that individual is gone, or if they're cured, perhaps then the sign comes down automatically.
And the reevaluation was 3 years?
Yes.
Can we ask questions, or do we need a motion first?
Do we need a motion first?
Madam Mayor, I move the special needs sign policy be approved as presented.
Support.
Questions and comments?
I had a couple questions. One thing, and I apologize, I made a bunch of notes, but I unfortunately forgot my notes, so I'm trying to go through them real quick. But one thing that jumped out at me, we have the signature for the requesting physician, and I think in addition to the requesting physician, that we obtain the physician ID number so that we can validate that it's a real person
Yeah,
and not my neighbor.
Okay.
And then the other thing that stood out for me was, we talk about, in here there was the need, establishing the need for a sign because they couldn't be alerted to traffic through sound, sight, or cognitive ability. And I think that instead of trying to, we ask for specific information about people's medical, and instead of doing that, because that's, there's potential HIPAA things and all that kind of stuff, I think that we should ask for the physician to give a dissertation, if you will, about why they cannot identify traffic by sight, hearing, or cognitive ability, as opposed to saying they're, have this diagnosis.
That's a good observation, and I think that, I don't know if that has to be amended in it as much as it can be attached to the document as part of the process that is used in issuing the sign. I know that in the ordinance, I had language in there that there has to be a specific detail provided in connection with the need for the sign from a doctor. And even medical records can be supplied or referred to, but if supplied and examined, they are in the custody then of the police chief, and they're never public. But they're there to support the rationale behind it, and that's in the ordinance.
And that's why I was, instead of getting to we're receiving medical records, and like I said, there's a whole, any HIPAA violation
Right.
potentially around that,
Right.
that if, instead of saying, because I don't know if you have, I don't know, X diagnosis, that necessarily means you can't do this and that. If we talk more about the result of the diagnosis as opposed to the diagnosis, so that we can act based on the medical information for that.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
And that will cover any HIPAA concerns if the doctor's writing.
Right.
It's kind of this, is it
So
kind of the
if
same?
if they're addressing that this person has an inability to see, hear, or cognitively react to traffic because when presented with those kinds of stimuli, they will respond this way, based on their diagnosis, which they don't need to disclose, but, if they have an inability to see things or whatever, I mean, a physician's going to know how to word that, but so that they're wording it in such a way as to what establishes their need to warn other people about their inability to see what's coming versus why they have the inability to see what's coming.
Okay, I think that's a good observation, and quite honestly, I think it would be better in the ordinance because it shows an illustration of what your burden is.
Right.
And that could be a deterrent in and of itself.
Yes.
Okay, good observation.
Mr. Kingsep,
Yes.
I have one question. So this, on May 3rd of 2018, the Traffic and Safety Board unanimously passed a motion to recommend that we, as a body, adopt
Right.
a policy. 10 months seems like a little long. I know we had a lot going on, but
Well, there was a time they didn't have a quorum, so they couldn't have any meetings, and that's why the bylaws are changed too now, or the ordinance is changed so that the ex officio member can vote and participate in discussions. So they didn't have meetings, and then we had changes to the documentation. So that's the cause of the delay.
understood.
So how is this, because we have made changes to your proposed document.
Well,
So we don't want to prove it as presented because we're asking changes to be
Well,
made,
the
correct?
change is going to be in the ordinance.
Okay.
This is just a policy.
Okay.
So I
Wanted
want,
to make
if you
sure.
can approve this policy, then we can now get to the ordinance, and I'll just, the ordinance is already, but I'm going to add to the ordinance the illustrations. They've just been alluded to as a good example. And that will be at the next meeting for first reading.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, roll call, please.
Councilmember Milan?
Yes.
Councilmember Moffett?
Yes.
Councilmember Albrecht?
Yes.
Mayor Woolley?
Yes,
Councilmember Ayers?
Yes.
and the motion carries.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is consideration of renewing the lease agreement with Motor City Food Products, LLC. This has been a relationship that we've had for quite some time over at the Hunter Community Center, and it just must be the time to annually renew it.
Yeah, I've
Madam Mayor-
reviewed it, it's the same language, there's no material, there's no change at all.
I think it
other
just
than the
dates when I looked at it.
Extension of it.
Madam Mayor, I move that a one-year lease with Motor City Food Products LLC in the amount of $25 per hour, a minimum of $25 per use, beginning March 1st, 2019, for the use of space in the senior citizen kitchen located at Hunter Community Center be approved.
Support?
Are there any further questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Councilmember Moffett?
Yes.
Councilmember Albrecht?
Yes.
Mayor Woolley?
Yes,
Councilmember Ayers?
Yes.
Councilmember Milan?
Yes.
and the motion carries. The next item on the agenda was consideration of approving the service agreement for controller services by and between the Woodhill Group and the city of Clawson. There was additional information that was provided to council in regard to Chris, our current accountant helper, and she's agreed to extend her services as she can. So I believe we are either removing this from the agenda if
Yes.
approved, or we
Yes,
just
Mayor.
will not.
Based on the email and the agreement with Chris, I think that would be the best option moving forward, as she's got experience directly with the city, and if she's willing to stay on till the new manager's in place, then becomes redundant or actually a moot point. However, there would be available if we needed a backup. But at this point, I would recommend this item be removed from the agenda.
Do I have a motion to remove it from the agenda?
Madam Mayor, I move that our agenda this evening be amended by removing item number 8.
Support.
Any other comments, questions? Roll call, please.
Councilmember Albrecht?
Yes. Yes.
Mayor Woolley?
Yes,
Councilmember Ayers?
Yes.
Councilmember Milan?
Yes.
Councilmember Moffett?
Yes.
motion carries, and agenda item number 8 has been removed. The next item on the agenda is consideration of appointing interim city clerk Victoria Mitchell as the designated Freedom of Information Act or FOIA coordinator for the city. This position is open because of our city clerk, Mr. Smith, leaving the city, and so that responsibility needs to be picked up and taken care of.
Madam Mayor, I move the appointment of interim city clerk Victoria Mitchell as the main designated Freedom of Information Act FOIA coordinator for the city be approved.
Support.
Any questions? I just wanted to note that Victoria is signing, the certification class was coming soon. They canceled it because of the snow day, so it will be rescheduled. And we have other resources with Mr. Sarvello here as a backup if need be.
Exactly.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Woolley?
Yes.
Councilmember Ayers?
Yes.
Councilmember Milan?
Yes.
Councilmember Moffett?
Yes.
Councilmember Albrecht?
Yes.
And the motion carries. Thank you, Victoria, for stepping up.
Absolutely.
The next item on the agenda is consideration of approving the updated boards and commission application and checklist. This checklist was updated and presented because of the best practice findings of the redevelopment ready community program.
Madam Mayor, I move that the updated boards and commission application and checklist be approved as presented.
Support.
I have some questions and comments. I looked at the recommendation, and my concern on the language in here is that we really want a wide range of people in our community to apply for and be a part of the process. And I feel that defining what is appropriate on a particular board isn't fair to the wide and diverse community that we have, and we maybe want to be more expansive with the list of recommended individuals. Planning commissions and zoning boards, based on the things that I've found on the internet, they say it shouldn't necessarily be all a bunch of builders, all a bunch of planners, that you want a wide variety of, business owners and homeowners, domestic engineers. And I'd like to see that this list be more expanded to include all facets of our community.
Madam Mayor, let me suggest this also, and it relates to the Planning Commission. This is not in Zoning Board of Appeals, so it doesn't have the description, but, and I quote 34-33, appointments and terms, and the language of that ordinance, which has been around for a long time, but it was amended in 2011 and also 2017. It says the Planning Commission members are qualified electors of the city, except one commission member may be an individual who's a qualified elector. Then it goes on to say the membership will be representative of segments of the community, such as but not limited to economic, governmental, educational, social development of the city in accordance with the major interests as they exist, but not limited to agriculture, natural resources, recreation, education, public health, government, transportation, industry, and commerce. So essentially, you already have the classifications in the ordinance itself. And so it's worked well throughout the number of years I've been here, just by the various backgrounds that appear in the community and fairly representative. So, I mean, if you're inclined to adopt this, I hope it's not intended to be the list that is to be followed. Because that sort of excludes the broad categories of the section that I quoted in the ordinance.
And maybe that's one way that we take that language from the ordinance and put it on the application as it is.
If I'm looking at page 3, and the language that Mr. Kingsep read is actually part of the application. And I don't know if Mr. Kingsep, you added the words "but not limited" to that reading.
Right.
I would
Not
take,
limited. It says in there, but not limited to.
I would take the list that has been submitted to us as just an opportunity for people to tell what their strengths are, and I wouldn't say that it would be exclusionary in any way. And I would also hope that although we do want a wide variety of people to serve on throughout the city, we also want to ensure that we're selecting people who have knowledge. Planning is difficult. It's difficult when you have a clue about some of the things they're talking about. To put someone in that is just has no information at all, you're kind of doing them a disservice, because it's really hard. It's hard to make wise decisions. And it would be the same for any board or commission. You want people who have a passion for that area, not someone who just wants to sit on a place, right? Like, I want to help my city. Okay, let's find a great place for you to help your city, just like you do when you sign up for your kids' classrooms or whatever. Okay, you're good at sports, you can have whatever day, and you're good at cooking, you can be the room mom. You like to talk, you can be the coordinator. So we want to put people where their strengths are, and I wouldn't take this as an exclusionary in any way. I think it's kind of a good tool to start with, because it's better than what we currently have, for sure.
I think the list could potentially be a deterrent to people who might not meet those qualifications. But to your point, looking for someone who's passionate about it, I think that if we remove the list, because it's not representative, to Mr. Kingsip's point, it's not representative of the qualifications for some of the boards, and it's not just for the planning, but for the other ones. But instead of having that list, maybe we ask them to anecdotally explain why they have a passion for that board, or what qualifications they bring to the table that they would serve well on the board, or they could benefit the board for the different boards that we have. And that way we're not taking the chance of deterring anyone who can't check any boxes, and just let them explain to us why they feel they could serve the community on that board.
I would say if someone can't check any boxes, that we need to find something else for them to do rather than serve on one of our boards or commissions, just based on the fact that we want people who are actively involved and have some capacity to add. This is a value add thing, just like running for office or sitting on school board or any of those other things. And wasn't this put together part of the redevelopment? It was redevelopment ready, right? So, and nowhere does it say on here, you must fit 3 or 5 categories in order to meet it. And as Matt already said, our attorney read the list for planning as an example, and nearly everything was listed here that was on planning.
I disagree. If you look at that list, there's not education on that list of things they have under planning. There's not education, there's not transportation, there's not
I said
commerce.
nearly.
But they're not even represented slightly. It's all planning things, and that's the point. That
Would you like to make the list longer? Would you like to add something to the list?
No, what I said-
Should we make it more generic?
What I said is that we should remove the list and let people anecdotally explain what their passion is that they can bring to that board.
People don't know, because I will tell you, people don't even know what some boards and commissions do. They say, okay, yeah, I'll do that.
That's
And
why
they
there's that
don't even know what they're
explanation.
doing.
But, that was where I thought that the focus on really giving the job description and really what's expected of people on different boards, and explaining that well, and providing resources on the website if need be, and to check some links. I mean, I found a great link at plannersweb.com, and it gives all sorts of information on people that have been newly appointed to planning commissions, what to look for, what you need to learn. Michigan Municipal League has a great planning commission handbook that's available, which we may or may not already be giving out to people that are sitting on the commission. It was, I guess a point that was brought up previously in regard to our city manager search is lots of times on paper, it isn't necessarily all-inclusive if somebody is a good candidate or not. And so sometimes talking to somebody, there's some nuances that get brought to light that you don't see necessarily on paper, and checking a box as far as qualifications. And so I wouldn't want to exclude somebody because of that. I would like to be able to make sure that anybody that has the passion and wants to learn and be a part of, whichever board that they have passion about, just because, I guess I've looked at things, I may not be great at something, but I want to do that task and want to be involved. And it's really discouraging when you have somebody saying, well, I know you want to do that, honey, but you're not qualified, or you're not the right person. When we're looking at volunteers, certainly want to look at a lot of different criteria, and I don't know that necessarily saying you have to fit these items. Clawson's a special place, and we are special because we've allowed people of all walks of life to be part of those boards. I would agree we need more training. We need to describe more the description and things and what we need to do. But
to the councilwoman's point, I know at least one thing that was listed as, the list doesn't include education, but it does. In that list that was read, educational is one of the items that is an important segment of the community as outlined by Public Act 33, which is the Planning Enabling Act, right? This is already part of our ordinance. It's already part of Public Act, and I like to see people who are qualified as much as possible. And if somebody believes that by reviewing our application that they aren't qualified for a board, if the application is the only thing driving them away, because they can't check a couple boxes, right? Maybe by attending a couple meetings, they say, you know what, I can do this, and there are areas here that allow for long-form answers where they can explain away some of the reasons they don't check all the boxes. And I would love to see this put in place, frankly. If we have an incredible dearth of volunteers as a result of this, then we can tweak it. We're allowed to do that too, so.
All right, the only thing I say is this, that the language, which is a preamble to the Planning Commission as well as the Zoning Board of Appeals, has this: must be residents qualified by experience and/or training in matters related to land use planning. And then those examples below are land use planning. And the same qualification, and I refer to it as a limitation, because some people might look at it as a limitation, is Zoning Board of Appeals, residents qualified by experience and/or training in matters related to construction, land use planning, and zoning. And then it references please check below. So it's those categories. So someone can come in and say, well, I'd like to be on it, but I'm not qualified in those areas. And that's what gets me, is the fact that we've had a history where there have been people on both of those bodies that had no training in the specifics or the guts of the matters that come before them, and yet they exercise tremendously good judgment in making decisions. And I don't want someone to feel limited by the language that's read. Now, it may be in some policy book that that's it, but I would say if you're going to do that, then don't you have to change your ordinance so to read the same way? Because you have an inconsistency technically. So, that's my liberal side coming out, is that people like to volunteer, but they're easily deterred if they look at language and it shows, well, I'm not qualified in that area, that category, but I like to be on it. That's what I have trouble with.
I hate to put you on the spot, Mr. Ayers, but you've served in all these different, many of the boards here in town through the years. What's your thought on part of the process?
Well, if somebody's got the gumption to get on one of these boards and doesn't know anything about it and just wants to do it just because they want to be part of the community, want to learn this thing, I see nothing wrong with that. I remember when I got appointed to the Planning Commission, I didn't know that much about it, but all of a sudden I learned a lot. And if somebody wants to run for Planning Commission or be on that Planning Commission or Board of Review, if that's what they want to do, God love them, let them do it. They don't need to, they can learn.
And the readiness requirements only require that we have a formalized application. It doesn't require that we, gather information like employment history and that sort of thing. You have it there, I see it there. It doesn't require that we be onerous in the application process. It just requires that we have a formalized application process. And so like I said, to Howie's point, letting people express their passions and why they feel like they could serve in the board versus holding them up to some sort of criteria might be more welcoming.
You do that when you're hiring someone?
I'm paying someone and have liability associated with the performance of their job, whereas a volunteer doesn't necessarily rise
So
to
that's
that.
a yes or no? Would you do that when you're
If I were
hiring
hiring,
someone
if
for
I
a
were hiring
specific
volunteers, absolutely I would.
But you've worked with volunteers, right? You've worked in a lot of community organizations, so certain people are well suited for certain things. Like everyone is not suited for the same thing. And I never, when I looked at this, did I say this is exclusionary? And if you would want to put a comment in there that says these are not exclusionary, right? Do that. But this is really smart to have these categories. It shows someone what skills are innately attached to these boards and commissions. It's a really wise thing to do. Someone may see something and have an attribute that they could put someplace else. And it's a good thing. And we don't have people coming to the doors going, let me fill out your applications unless they're ready to join something. Let's be honest. And you're the one that gets them. You're the one that gets to a point. You can have a conversation with someone and say, I don't have anything on that right now. I have something on this. How do you feel about this? This is what this committee does. I mean, it's a whole work in progress. This form right here is not a make or break anyways. It's an entryway. And we worry about our city. Let's be professional in all the things we do. Let's hold ourselves to a higher standard in all the things that we do. I don't want to turn anyone away for anything, but I also don't want to just put someone somewhere because there's an open seat and they're like, oh yeah, I'll go sit there. That's just not even wise. We deserve better than that.
I think we trust the mayor, who has the duty to appoint those positions, for making an informed decision about who they're appointing, and they're not just throwing people, just because the application doesn't, drill and gather a bunch of information doesn't mean the mayor's making uninformed decisions. I think that's a great leap that you shouldn't make.
I wasn't dissing the mayor.
But that you were saying that they're just filling empty seats because we don't have this very onerous application process, and I disagree with that.
If I might, I want our business owners and our residents to be confident in their boards and commissions. I don't mind having an application that asks a lot of these questions. To Mr. Kingsep's point, there is some language in here that might be tweaked. Mr. Haberman, from whom did this application come?
It's directly out of the redevelopment manual.
Okay.
It's verbatim.
Okay.
Yes, I think all she did was she titled it with our particular boards and commissions, but the base form, and I believe I emailed it earlier to the mayor, that it came directly out of the manual.
When you say she?
Ms. Steck, I'm sorry.
Okay. If we wanted something in this to be edited, who could we refer that back to? Is it a clerk's role?
Of course it is.
Someone in the administration, we could address it.
Okay.
Whatever your comments are. That, this was, like I say, it's a form that the state, that the agency put in, but I don't believe it was an absolute that it must be verbatim.
Sure.
Obviously, this is a community. Other communities have their own variances. So, if you have recommendations as to what amendments you feel need to be made, we'll figure out how to make it happen and get it back to you.
Because the standards of the redevelopment-ready community for this particular section is the community sets expectations for board and commission positions.
Correct.
And I certainly want us to educate anybody that wants to apply for any of those things and look at training them better and getting the right fit. I just would like to see this document be more of our own instead of the pulled out of a book and put in ours.
To the council member's point about liability, Mr. Kingsep, is the city liable for any decision made by Planning Commission, Zoning Board of Appeals? Could the city be held liable? Could the city be sued over a decision that is made by one of those boards?
Well, yeah, they are. I've been on both sides where I've sued the city because of an improper, not this city, but because of an improper zoning decision. Sterling Heights is an example, and I've defended in Birmingham where I had to defend the Planning Commission on a decision. So generally those decisions will be based on the fact that there wasn't a sufficient factual basis to support the decision, or else there was an arbitrary or capricious decision made that resulted in the denial, and the facts didn't support it. So they're generally those instances. And so it's an administrative appeal. So generally it'll be on the record, and it will be showing the record that there's error.
So my point is merely that the fact that somebody is a volunteer does not remove liability from the city.
It doesn't.
In that regard.
No. It's the process itself that will be appealed.
The city might be wise to qualify volunteers.
So maybe let's just do it in a more friendly manner, and there's other ways that wouldn't deter someone from applying. So let's take another pass at it and see if we can't find a less, a friendlier, more welcoming way to outline the qualifications that we would like to see, allowing for the fringes of experience.
And I don't mind looking at these checklists, right? Almost all of them say members must have, members should be, and if that sentence were removed from each one of these, I don't know if we get closer to a consensus. Members must be city residents qualified by experience and/or training in matters related to real estate. I don't know if removing that sentence makes this body happy or not. I would personally, I still like to see these check boxes, right? Where members are appointed by the city council, please check below if you have experience in, right? And so then it doesn't seem as exclusionary to the point of.
Or let's broaden it to the breadth of potential experience. So let's put education or transportation or commerce on the list for planning, because those are identified as qualifications. Or have an other, if your experience is not listed above, please explain what experience is applicable to the board.
Okay.
Doesn't it have a place that says what can you add or what?
Not in
something like that?
not in those specific paragraphs, not included in
Not in
the
the check
checklist.
boxes.
No, it's in a completely different part.
Well, then maybe we need a place that says what value would you bring to this board and/or commission?
Or just incorporate it in those.
Well, you
pages.
can always have a preamble to it that says basically, and I'm just characterizing this, a phrase that the strength of a city is the responsibility and involvement of its residents in the various boards and commissions that are outlined herein. And then you can say that examples of some experience are outlined as illustrations only, but not as limitations. And then you can just do it that way. So it's a general statement, and it just shows examples and nothing more. So you dispel the thought that someone might have of, well, I don't have that, so why should I even apply? You're encouraging anyone to apply.
If I might, too, these are the questions that are the free-form, open-ended questions. Describe any experiences that led to your desire to serve the community. And then the other one is provide a brief biography, including your skills, background, and expertise, as well as involvement in the community, professional, or other nonprofit organizations that are specifically applicable to this board or commission. If that, if
That
we,
could be highlighted.
I mean, if we still feel the need to add to every section and other, and please explain, I'm fine with that. We're spending a lot of time on this, and that's fine. I think it's an important thing, but how can we move forward?
I'd say that administration take a pass and tweak based on this conversation and have another reading of it and present something back.
So we have a motion second that we need to vote on, right?
Yes.
Yes, we do.
And then we could make another motion
Yep.
if that fails.
So roll call, please.
Councilmember Ayers,
Yeah.
Councilmember Milan,
Yes.
Councilmember Moffett,
No?
Councilmember Albrecht,
No.
Mayor Woolley.
No? Okay, so we need a new motion.
Madam Mayor, I move that the board and commission's application be returned to administration for additional revision and presented at a later date.
Support.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Milan,
No.
Councilmember Moffett,
Yes?
Councilmember Albrecht,
Yes.
Mayor Woolley,
Yes,
Councilmember Ayers.
Yes.
and the motion carries. The next item on the agenda is consideration of receiving and filing the 2018 Planning Commission Annual Report for the City of Clawson.
Madam Mayor, I move the 2018 Planning Commission Annual Report for the City of Clawson be received and filed with the city clerk.
Support.
This was presented to us by our current city planning company. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Milan,
Yes.
Councilmember Moffett,
Yes.
Councilmember Albrecht,
Yes.
Mayor Woolley,
Yes,
Councilmember Ayers.
Yes.
and the motion carries. The next item on the agenda is consideration of receiving and filing the 2019 determination of the Compensation Commission. The Compensation Commission meets every 2 years and establishes the annual pay for meetings for this body. And the items that they're proposing, that the mayor shall receive the sum of $50 for each meeting attended from July 1st, 2019 until June 30th of 2021 for 35 meetings annually, and $50 for attendance at the monthly DDA meetings not to exceed $2,350. And councilperson shall receive the sum of $50 for each meeting attended from July 1st, 2019 until June 30th, 2021 for 35 meetings annually, not to exceed $1,750 per person. And that the mayor and councilperson shall receive the sum of $100 per diem for each state and national meetings attended, not to exceed $1,300 per person.
Madam Mayor, I move the 2019 determination by the Compensation Commission be received and filed and become effective July 1st, 2019 until June 30th, 2021.
No support? Support. I would support it.
Oh, you swear? Okay.
Are there any additional questions or comments?
Yeah, I don't see the raise or the need for this increase, and I think that, we're going to have a presentation a little bit from the city manager. It's on the agenda. He's going to talk about the city's finances and how we have other things we have to address, and I think that in light of that, I don't think that there should be an increase in the compensation at this time.
My comments are that the mayor is the chief executive officer of the Downtown Development Authority and is required to attend meetings. And at this time, there's no recognition of those attendance have to be made by the mayor. And this addresses that.
Mr. Kingsep, I don't know if you are, if I might, I don't know if you're the one to answer this question. So who is responsible for determining the compensation of city council?
I thought it was council. And a recommendation of management, city manager.
The Compensation Commission is a statutory
is it?
position.
Okay.
And they are obligated and required to present a finding every 2 years. It is the council's role to either accept or reject that, but that is a recommendation from the Compensation Board after their deliberations and what they're recommending that the council approve.
So is it permissible to if we were to reject the entire part of it and just approve the additional $50 for the DDA meetings? Can we do that?
Yeah, you're the governing body. This is a recommendation, and it is a statutory body that is required to make a recommendation, but you have the final decision as to what part, all, or none.
I believe the mayor should at least be compensated more so than we should, because she has a lot on her plate, plus the DDA meetings. So, that's the way I see it.
So where do we go from here on this item, Mr.
Well,
Kingsept?
There are two ways. Number one, you can make that motion now to correct that part of the recommendation, or you can refer back to the Compensation Committee with the explanation on why it's being referred back to them for reconsideration. And that they do that and report to you in the normal course of business.
Is there any requirements, do you know, Victoria, in regard to the timeline and when they have to meet and make these? Is there any restriction on that?
Yeah, I'm not aware of a timeline.
Okay.
So I am, if I might, I am looking at our Code of Ordinances, Section 2-332. The Compensation Commission shall determine the salaries of all elected officials. The determination of the commission shall be the salary of such elected officials unless the city council, by a resolution adopted by 2/3 of the members elected to the council, rejects them. The determination of the commission shall become effective 30 days following their filing with the city clerk unless rejected by the council, as provided in this section. If the council should reject the determination of the Compensation Commission, the existing salary shall prevail. Any expense allowance or reimbursement paid to elected officials in addition to salary shall be for expenses incurred in the course of city business. So I don't see a line item veto in this. It just,
No, but
by my
it doesn't
reading.
preclude you from asking the reconsideration either. And I think that'd be the more prudent way to do it. With the rationale behind that request and why it's being referred back to them.
So do we need,
We have a
we
motion.
need
and a
to,
second.
we have a motion on the table, so we need to vote this up or down. So roll call, please.
Councilmember Moffett?
No.
Councilmember Albrecht?
No.
Mayor Woolley?
Yes.
Councilmember Ayers?
No.
Councilmember Milan?
No.
And the motion fails.
So how do we do it where we can, give the mayor more money and, because she obviously attends more meetings than we do?
So we make a motion to refer it back to.
I think you make a motion to refer it back to the Compensation Committee on the basis that they'd had inadequate information to completely address all issues regarding compensation. And then I think what should be done, perhaps the city manager can do this, is amplify that motion by giving the explanation on what was not covered and what actually work is done by the mayor that's in addition to the duties of mayor, and how that's uncompensated, and any other things that might come into play regarding that particular recommendation. Then they have a record before them to consider.
I'll make a motion. I would like to make a motion that we refer this item back to the Compensation Committee, along with a note that says we are extremely grateful that they thought well enough of this body to offer us a $10 per meeting increase with the annual cap. And although we are grateful, at this time we would like to decline that because we're very happy to serve at the rate we're currently making, but we do feel that our mayor deserves to be compensated for all DDA meetings, and we would like for them to reassess the situation, taking council out of consideration and just allocating an additional fund for the mayor for all DDA meetings.
Support.
Thank you.
Worded.
Further conversation.
All that, Victoria? It's extremely important, as is.
That's where we're grateful that these meetings are recorded.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Albrecht?
Yes.
Mayor Woolley?
Yes.
Councilmember Ayers?
Yes.
Councilmember Milan?
Yes.
Councilmember Moffett?
Yes. And the motion carries, and we'll refer this back to the Compensation Committee. The next item on the agenda is consideration of declaring the week of March 24th through March 30th, 2019 as Severe Weather Awareness Week. At Oakland County, the purpose of this is to raise the awareness of levels of our citizens and offer schools and businesses an opportunity to test their internal disaster plans during normal business hours. They provide information that will heighten awareness of Oakland County outdoor warning systems and what to do when the sirens are activated, register for Oak Alert, which is Oakland County's emergency notification system, review or develop tornado take cover plans and planning materials are available through Oakland County, provide instructions on tornado safety, and publicize the date and time of the test, which is Wednesday, March 27th at 1 p.m.
Madam Mayor, I move that the week of March 24th through March 30th, 2019 be declared Severe Weather Awareness Week in the city of Clawson.
Support.
Any additional questions, comments? I just want to say our thoughts and prayers go out to the folks of Alabama, the tragedy of the tornadoes there, and hope that this awareness week here in town will prevent what we can here in the state of Michigan and the city of Clawson. Motion carries. Oh, roll call, please. Sorry, got carried away.
Mayor Woolley,
Yes.
Councilmember Harris,
Yes.
Councilmember Milan,
Yes.
Councilmember Moffett,
Yes.
Councilmember Albrecht.
Yes.
And the motion carries. The next item on the agenda is consideration of the list of bills as presented.
Madam Mayor, pay the bills as approved.
Support?
Were there any questions or comments on the bills?
I had two questions, just in regard to, first one's in regard to check number 28595. It was listed as a replacement check for a stipend for an individual, and I was just curious what the stipend was for.
The stipend was for the healthcare deductible that we give, this is under the ASME contract, and the check wasn't cashed within the 60 days, and our checks expire after 60 days, so we reissued the check.
So is
But
it-
it's per the union contract.
Is it drawn on the healthcare account?
Yes,
then?
ma'am. It's
Okay,
on the
all right.
healthcare.
And then the other one was under check number 82600 for payment for Guardian Angels parking lot rehab.
Actually, the check was to AEW, and it was for the site plan review for the rehab of that facility. So it was a site plan review, and AEW was paid, but Guardian Angels paid us for the site plan review, so it's just a transfer of
Pass-through?
funds. Yes, ma'am.
There's no further questions. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Harris,
Yes.
Councilmember Milan,
Yes.
Councilmember Moffett,
Yes.
Councilmember Albrecht,
Yes.
Mayor Woolley.
Yes. And we're going to pay the bills. Next item on the agenda is the city attorney's report.
I have two things to report. Number one is that we had a good meeting with the planning department last Thursday, and we discussed two things. One is signage and the progress on that, and the team is together, which is Jim Albus as well as Giffords Webster planners on it. They've received a 5-page document that I've done of an analysis of the sign ordinance and the revision of provisions, if not deletion of those provisions, and the fact that we'll be probably working that over a period of 3 months, and they'll get that report for the next week. It's a complicated process, but we believe we can make the sign ordinance substantially less number of pages than it currently exists and more contemporary.
In what way is the planning commission and zoning board being included in this process? Is that happening yet, or that's coming down the future?
That's
What
coming,
type
I
of-
prepared the reports that are going to the planning commission for the next meeting. They'll be on their agenda for next meeting. I'm just filling you in on what we discussed last week. The other thing that's occurring, and this was brought to my attention by Jim Albus, is the fact that he has received a request for a lot split of a large lot. And we talked about the existence of a moratorium. So I have a draft opinion that will go to the Planning Commission to come up with a recommendation to the City Council on a moratorium. It's indefinite as to the time frame, whether it's going to be 3 months or 6 months, based upon how long it may take to get work done on the sign ordinance itself. But this goes to the large lot split because there's some problem right now on the ability of the Planning Commission to make a decision on the recommendations that are being presented to them. And until we get that resolved, we should not grant any lot splits. So the moratorium is a legal memorandum that justifies case law showing you can get into a moratorium. And right now I've provided, although I may change it, but I've basically provided that the moratorium will bar the issuance of any building permits on any lot split. I may tie bar it into any lot split, period. So those are not considered. So that's in the works, and you're being advised that the recommendation will be for the Planning Commission, if they go with the moratorium, to make the recommendation to you to adopt it. It's in your authority.
What's the roadblock to making decisions?
Well, there's an inconsistency of consensus on the Planning Commission regarding changes to the large lot split, or leaving it as it is. Until you get that resolved, it's sort of hard to determine what you're going to do. The other thing is, and we talked about this, all of these subdivisions with large lots had deed restrictions when the plat was created. In some instances, the deed restrictions could clearly indicate why the lots dimensions were created as they were. Because you'll see communities where there are purposely plats that were developed with smaller lots and those with larger lots. I use as an example Vincetta Boulevard in Royal Oak. Vincetta Boulevard was platted entirely different than the areas surrounding that subdivision and the areas on 12 Mile Road because they were smaller. But it was designed to contain distinctive housing, and that's how that plat was developed. That may be the essence of some of the larger lots that you have in the plats that have not been subdivided or lot splits. There may be a rationale there on why they wanted larger lots and not smaller lots. So if that's in the deed restrictions, then that gives you some history and rationale on why that plat was as it was, and that gives you justification to then say that there will be no lot splits in that area, and you can reverse specifically to the plat that was filed at that time.
Well, was that not looked at when they did that master
No, we didn't go
document
into
that's been
that.
referred
No,
to?
we didn't go into detail on that. We looked at the general area of the plats themselves. We never pulled the deed restrictions. That becomes an expensive proposition. But there was enough there based on the study at the time that we never pulled them for all the large subdivisions.
So I'm just talking, is it reasonable if somebody that was going to request a large lot to be split, that they incur the expense of requesting that?
You know,
or no?
that was
I mean,
raised.
I don't know
know.
if that's appropriate or not.
No,
Just-
that was raised, and I'll tell you quite honestly, you know, there are two sides of the argument on that, and I haven't decided that. One, what's the logical burden that we impose on that lot owner who has to get the subdivision restrictions as opposed to purely the title policy, but the actual restrictions themselves to prove that they have the right to split? I got to figure out that, as opposed to a public interest purpose, if you're going to have restrictions, that you put the burden on the city. I haven't resolved that dichotomy. It's there. So I can't answer your question.
Mr. Kingsep, this potential proposed moratorium, I have two questions. Is the moratorium on lot splits of large lots only?
Yeah, it would apply only to the large lots.
Okay. And is that only residential, or is it
It's
all large lots in the city?
Good point. Because I've got to look at the one that's in. I think it involves a church. And it's a split of that. And I've got to look at that in particular and where it is in relationship to large lots. Is it unique by itself, or is it in part of a subdivision? So I can't answer that question. But it's aimed at really the large lots, but there could be that differentiation that might apply to it.
Okay, thank you.
That's all I have.
Okay, city managers report.
Yes, Madam Mayor and members of the City Council. I've been working on mainly in the finance area with the city in reviewing its financial situation today and also in terms of the budget and looking down the line at the challenges ahead. I want to say that while this, excuse me, while this report is specific to the city of Clawson, the city of Clawson is not unique in the state of Michigan. The same dynamics apply to virtually every city in the state of Michigan. We're all dealing with a lot of the same issues, and I think that'll become more clear as the report unfolds. Municipal authority in Michigan, I note here that we're a subunit of state government, and I state that simply because that's the practical reality. Years ago, there's a rule out there, that Dillon's rule, that was developed by a court justice in, I believe, the state of Iowa, and has been used in government for over a century, and that is that municipalities have no authority, autonomous authority, save that given to them by the state. The Michigan Supreme Court has ruled that cities and counties within the state have no legal authority save that which is given to them by the legislature. So for all intents and purposes, while we all have unique names and we have a certain amount of autonomy within our community, basically the legislature is what gives us any authority, or any authority we lack is because the legislature has refused to give us that authority. Currently, revenue sharing that we receive from the state, we have one that's constitutional. The state constitution requires that the state grant to all of its subunits a certain amount of money laid out by formula. And then as part of the Property Tax Reform Act, so-called Proposal A, statutory by statute, the Michigan legislature also set out a formula wherein we share in basically sales tax revenues. But as we all know, if you've been in Michigan government for a period of more than 10 years, you will recognize that early on in the early 2000s, that the legislature, that which it gave us, began to take away. And that the statutory revenue sharing started to decrease, and it decreased significantly over the years. It's on the rise as of late, but again, it represents or demonstrates that essentially our revenue stream, there's a significant amount of control by the state legislature. And then on top of it, all local taxes and fees are also limited by the state. I'm sure you've heard of the case out of Lansing, Bolt v. Lansing, in which we have tie bars on fees, that fees have to be basically consistent or reasonably related to the service provided. We also have local taxes and limitations on property taxes. And so all of these are as a result of state action. Between 2007 and 2010, we lost significant revenues, primarily in property taxes. Some communities, my numbers in Clawson indicate probably close to 25%. When I was in Fraser lost over 30%. And there's a range in there where in that time frame, the bulk of our revenue stream, which is property taxes, was reduced significantly. And we still have not recovered from that. Headley and Proposal A limit growth from a low of 5% or the rate of inflation, whichever is the lower. And it was never anticipated when Proposal A was put into place that we would see a recession or a drop in property taxes. It was always assumed that property taxes would go up every year, and that formula worked fine. But when the base dropped 25%, we're still stuck with that same relationship. It's 5% or the rate of inflation, whichever is lower. But now it's applied to a lower base than it was in 2007. Legacy costs from pension retiree health care are now a significant part of our annual budget. In other words, our present is being burdened by past decisions. Clawson, to its credit, eliminated retiree health care and defined benefit pension plan in 2004. So while the costs were capped, the cost of benefits that we had issued prior to 2004 continue to this date. The total cost for these prior benefits is nearly $30 million, or represents more than 15% of our current annual budget. In the past, the pension obligation was paid. The past pension obligation was recently paid for using a pension obligation bond. While it reduces our annual cost, it did eliminate 25% of our total bond capacity, which will limit the flexibility for bonding on large capital projects for up to the next decade. So while we reduce the impact on our annual budget, the cost will continue to limit our financial flexibility into the future. In 2010, since 2010, our city taxes have decreased 0.9243 mils. In other words, we have actually almost a mil less in taxes than we had in 2010. And these monies are used to pay for all city operations except water, sewer, and rubbish. Overall taxes, this is the overall tax burden our taxpayers have seen, have increased 6.2071 mils. Schools and education is down 3.4704, and the county and other agency taxes are up 0.10 mils. This will give you an idea of what the summer tax bill goes for, and you will see that the bulk of the taxpayers' monies that are paid in the summer tax bill goes to the schools. In the yellow, that's demonstrated by the red at the lower part of the circle. Then up in the middle left is yellow. That's other education. That includes the county and the state and other school taxes. So you can see that as in looking at this, that over 50% of the taxes go to education. And then your county taxes are in the black. The library is in green, and rubbish is in the tan. And city bond is in blue. And so in the city operating, let me clarify. The tan is the city operating, the brown is the rubbish. But so you can see that on this pie chart that less than 25% of your annual tax bill goes to pay for city operations. Assessment values, as you can see, have been recovering. In the last 4 years, they've recovered from a total taxable value of about $315 million to just shy of $360 million in the last year. But again, even though those assessment values have increased, and it appears they've increased substantially, the tax value that has resulted from that has been rolled back by Headley each year. So there's been an offset, so you're not seeing a significant increase. The property taxes per mill are just under 360,000. So each mill that we have, we are now generating about 40,000 a year more than we were in 2014. The value of a mill has increased 44,190 or 14% between 2014 and 18. But Headley rolled back the operating mill from 15 mills to 1393, or half of that. So we have a net gain of about 7%. But the cost of goods and services have increased to 4.4, and the net gain over that span was 2.6. The whole point, this is the state revenue sharing. You can see there has been growth there, but we're talking about less than $150,000 per year over the last 4 years. And so while tax revenues are up 14% over the past 5 years, the Headley rollback has reduced it for a net gain of less than 7%, while state revenue sharing is up a small amount as well. But actual property tax revenues, the money that we generate through property taxes, is still down $134,000 from 2006. So we've made no gains in the last 12 years in terms of our revenues. The city still has not recovered from the property value recession. While revenue sharing is up, regardless of the combination, we are still at a negative $10,000 to where we were. So in effect, Clawson is paying 2019 prices with 2006 income. Now keep in mind, this is not unique to Clawson. I mean, all cities are seeing this, and that's why you're seeing a lot of struggling, especially in southeast Michigan. And the primary reason for that, and the reason I think in assessing this, and I've been looking at this for the last decade, and you wonder why the legislature doesn't understand the problem that we're confronted with in southeast Michigan. And when you look at the legislative map, you start coming to the conclusion that much of the legislature is from rural areas, are less urban areas, and as a result, the development that they get is brand-new development, uncapped development. Here, we get redevelopment based on a capped value, and as a result, we get very little out of that redevelopment. We don't have, since we're already infilled, we have very little new development. And so the legislature is looking at Southeast Michigan and trying to understand what our problem is, and our problem is we can't share in the wealth that they're gaining by brand-new uncapped development. So during the time we were seeing a downturn, many of these counties and cities were actually seeing growth between 2007 and 2014. And so there's a disconnect at the legislature to truly understand what the issue is. Today, Nolan Finley did a very nice editorial in which he identified that the legislature is starting to wake up to it, and there are discussions, some willing to take on the discussion for Proposal A, as they see that as the major inhibitor, especially in Southeast Michigan, the Grand Rapids area, and the Lansing area. But the problem you've got with Proposal A is it's a constitutional amendment. So you have a very complicated Proposal A that you're going to try to undo, and anything the legislature does in this is probably not going to be very uncomplicated. And trying to explain what we're trying to undo can make it very difficult when you get into a ballot issue, especially one where you're going to go and amend the state constitution. And as you know, typically when people are not clear on what the vote is, they will vote no. So it's a very difficult task ahead. First, to even get the legislature to propose it, and then second, to get it on the ballot, and third, to get it adopted by the public to undo this issue. And this is our challenge, because this gap that we have right now will not close. It can't close under current property tax rules and laws because the numbers are against us. And unfortunately, the only choice you're left with at the local level is by actually increasing the local property taxes to close that revenue gap and get us back to where our revenues are in sync with the cost of doing business today. Thank you. That concludes my presentation. I do want to mention to the council that I have completed a draft budget. So there is one done. It's within about $20,000 of being actually in balance. So it's fairly close, but at least the new manager will have something to work with instead of having to develop this thing from scratch. So that is completed. So hopefully we'll be able to, the city will be able to pick up and move forward on its regular schedule as far as the budget process is outlined in the charter. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Council.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions in regard to the presentation?
It's difficult.
Pie charts always are telling. City Clerk's report, please.
I have one item. I just wanted to let council know that I will be at the Michigan Association of Municipal Clerks Institute, March 10th through March 15th, and that's the second year of my certification program. So I will be out of the office next week.
Okay. Will there be anybody covering yet? Identified?
Mike will be available via phone if there is an emergent issue.
So don't we need minutes taken on the 14th?
No, it's going to be a public meeting, and it's going to be taped. So can the minutes be done after the fact, Mr. Kingsept?
Well, they can be from a video.
Okay,
Yeah, that can be done.
because it is going to be video
Right.
in the community room, so.
I know we've hired temporary help to track
Yeah, we have
that in the
done
past.
that.
In
Or
fact,
is it the planning commission or the zoning board has somebody that takes minutes, and I wonder if they're available that day?
I don't know.
Mr. Haberman?
We do
I don't know.
the deputy clerk from Troy takes the minutes for our planning commission
That's
meetings.
right.
Okay.
And we do contract with her.
Is she available during, like, daytime hours, do you know?
I'm not sure. Yeah. Most likely not, and she does have her full-time position, day position.
Us having no one in the city clerk's office. during those days you're gone. If someone.
Oh, yeah, we'll be covering the office.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, we'll have somebody that can cover the office as far as, different duties along those lines. We have a clerical that can rotate back and forth.
Okay,
Yeah, the office won't be unattended.
good point.
Don't want the garage door closed as people come into City Hall. Not very welcoming.
Yes, good point.
Any other questions? Unfinished business. The council had a meeting prior to this, a special meeting in the community room to discuss the process for the new city manager and what we intend to do about that. We were presented with 7 candidates, and interviews are going to happen next Thursday, and we need to decide at this time if we are going to discuss the candidates by number or and eliminate any of them, or if we would choose to have a special meeting. Well, I think we determined, there's been discussion in regard to if we don't eliminate some at this evening's meeting, that we would just have all 7 candidates come next Thursday. So I guess need a motion to discuss.
Madam Mayor, I move that we discuss the process for moving forward with the interviews scheduled for the 14th and how we're going to select the candidates to invite to that meeting.
Support.
I wanted to tell the public, the applicants have requested confidentiality, and so as much as we are committed to transparency and being, including the community in our discussion and debate, right now there's confidentiality that our agency has promised to those individuals. So we're very mindful of that. But we do want to have the discussion going forward on if we will be eliminating candidates or just plan on interviewing all 7 next Thursday. Discussion?
So as
And
I
what's the proper process on this,
Yeah.
Mr. Kingsept? How should we?
just talk, or?
Well, you can
We'll
discuss
open
it
the floor to
right
discuss
now,
it, and then we'll have to.
and then you're going to have to decide on what the motion will be.
And just to point out, the motion is that we discuss
Correct.
the issue right now, right?
Are you
Correct.
discussing it
I
right
wasn't
now?
sure which, what, if I was clear enough on the issue.
No, that's fine. I don't know if we were to have roll call on this motion, if it were to accomplish what we think it
No,
would.
you're
But,
just discussing.
Well, then, to open up the discussion, I think that is imperative that we reduce the number of candidates from 7 down to a more manageable level.
And I tend to agree that we need to get it to be more manageable. Some of the, options were that council could provide, each individual council member could give the agency our picks, and then they just kind of collaborate and remove. They make the elimination themselves. Or this body could discuss individual candidates at this time based on numbers or initials.
I have 3 candidates that stood out to me as ones that I was definitely interested in. And then, conversely, there was at least 2 candidates that I was not interested in moving forward with at all. We all reviewed the materials. Does anyone feel passionately about anyone, or definitely they want to weed someone out, or?
So I would be willing to say something along these lines, that if a candidate is unwilling to accept the salary as we've published it, that I don't know that I would be interested in speaking with that candidate.
I agree.
I think we have qualified candidates who would agree to the salaries that the salary range that we've proposed. So to me, if somebody is unwilling to accept that salary, that they have disqualified themselves in that merit. I've gotten some feedback from some folks that our range might be a little low, but I think we do have really qualified candidates that are happy with the range that we've provided.
So should we establish a method to identify the candidates, having not already established a numerical system? Maybe we use initials?
I mean, I said this in the workshop prior to this. I personally am uncomfortable using a secret code to communicate publicly. I don't, that's one step away from having a decoder ring that we all know what we're talking about.
But drink
nobody
Ovaltine.
nobody else knows what we're talking about. And whereby we might be technically following the law by having an open meeting, but where we're communicating in some sort of code that is, I don't know, not known to the public. That concerns me.
So
It concerns me.
I read an article recently on LinkedIn about things that companies should do. It was about getting ghosted by candidates, and it was talking about things that employers should not do so as not to be ghosted, right? So that there's a certain level of respect that an employer owes a candidate. We have certain things that we say to a candidate. We expect you to not, apply for the job and then demand a higher salary and those kinds of things. But there's also things that employers are obligated to do, like on the onset. It sets the stage of what the employment relationship's going to be like, and it sets the atmosphere that they're going to potentially come and work within. And one of the things is, Amy Cell organization promised them anonymity with their application, and fully understanding that unless someone is definitely going to be a finalist, they don't want the fact that they're searching for a job being public. And I think that there's a level of respect that we need to, as an employer, give those candidates for those couple of criteria that they offer their information to us on.
I wanted, I respect Mr. Albrecht's hesitation and concern, but I have contacted legal counsel and as well as Mr. Kingsop to ensure that the process of talking about it in a coded manner is legal, because we are just respecting the request for confidentiality. Mr. Albrecht certainly, I respect his uneasiness with this based on the current situation with counsel, but I feel comfortable with that process in discussing individuals based on legal counsel's advice.
Let me just say for the record that not only have I indicated that's an appropriate method based upon the requirements or the conditions that already exist of anonymity, but also another lawyer has opined on that who's provided advice to this council, and also communities have used that same process as well. So it's not uncommon. But I certainly understand the comfort level that's expressed by Mr. Albrecht on that, but I just wanted to clarify that. So it's your call on how you want to do it.
I mean, is it possible to talk about qualifications that we're looking for without
I think
getting into specifics about
I
specific
think so.
certain
I mean,
candidates?
yeah.
I mean, a willingness to take the job for the salary we've published, right? I think that's an important qualification based on the applicants, right?
And I like a certain, how do I want?
Can't we just give Amy Cell like 3 people that all of us agree upon, or let them kind of hold the bag? If we tell them who we want, each individual, let them put it together, and them to be the only ones who will be at that meeting?
What if there's no one that rises to the top with that? What if we all have completely three different people?
Well,
and then we're forfeiting our ability to, to represent the city in this decision. And that's, I mean, we need to be, I feel like we need to be, I get, Matt, your concern. I do, because we're all in that boat, but I feel like we need to be a little more decisive as a body and make some real decisions about how we're going to move forward.
So, I mean, in the workshop, we talked, I presented a possible solution, and I don't know if this can gain any traction here, but whereby we notify these 7 applicants who Amy Sell has very thoroughly vetted and has presented to us. And if we notify them that they are their names will be made publicly known, and that we will discuss them either tomorrow evening or Thursday evening to talk about who we want to bring in for interviews.
So if we were to do that, I think we need to have a definitive number that we're going to bring for interviews, because if she calls them, she were to call you and say, hey, your employer might find out tomorrow that you're applying for another job, there's, a 4 out of 7 chance that you're going to be the finalist, and have it blow up in your face. I mean, they need to understand what the possibility is that their employer is going to find out that they're looking for another job, and then them not even get a call for an interview.
So might I suggest that everybody who's applied to this has some sort of expectation that their name will be made known publicly, and they still might not get the job. Every single person who's applied for this position understands that, right?
I'm just saying that if we let them know the probability that they're going to reap the benefits of having that knowledge be.
So if it were said to them, you are the top 7 out of 100 applicants, right? And at this point, your name will be made known to the public, and it's possible that your employer will find out. They've already risen to a point of consideration that 93% have not. Right?
However, during the meeting previously, Amy suggested the fact that people are waiting this evening to be able to make arrangements, and that waiting till Thursday may not be practical because of travel arrangements that need to be made.
And I mean, I'm willing to cancel my plans tomorrow evening to have a meeting tomorrow evening if that's what we decide. I just.
I would like, if we are going to eliminate people based on their professional level, perhaps exceeding the very low rate that we posted for this job, because I think if we look back at the conversation we had regarding the posting on this position, advice was given that it perhaps was a little low, and I thought it was low, given the research that I did, not that I'm right, but if we're going to eliminate people based on that off the top, then I want to eliminate anyone that's out of state that we have to pay for travel and accommodations for when they come for an interview. And we'll cut our numbers down right there.
I wholeheartedly disagree with that approach.
I'm sure you would.
Well, that was very professional. I think that, we've gotten a ton of information. The only thing that's keeping you from wanting to discuss it is disclosing names to people who were promised their names would not be disclosed. I think that we should be able to, decide on the candidates that we are most interested in interviewing for this position, have a discussion about it in some manner, and just be decisive and move forward. I mean, it's not lack of information, because do you feel like you have all the information to make a decision tonight based on the candidates?
I mean, I could probably whittle it down to 5 in my mind fairly quickly.
Tonight?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so let's do that. Let's find a way to do that with keeping our promise to these candidates and allowing for them to make the travel arrangements if necessary, or for them to make arrangements to take time off of work. Let's not be indecisive. Let's use the body of information that's been carefully crafted and presented to us, and make a decision on the way forward.
If I'm the only person who has hesitation about this discussion happening, it should not hold back this body, right? I mean, we are a body of 5 and majority rules, right? So I don't want to, okay, but still, I don't want to I don't want this process to be derailed entirely just because of me. I think I've presented a solution whereby our candidates might be delayed from finding out by one day, potentially, that they have been selected to be interviewed.
But we're starting off the relationship breaking a confidence. And I feel like that sets just a bad precedent. I feel
Well,
like if a candidate would go, maybe I don't want to be part of that organization.
But at the same time, when you talk about tone, they would say, oh, they're really interested in transparency. Maybe that's the tone we set with that comment.
I don't think that relaying people's names is, there's so many other areas to be transparent. Saying candidates' names who've asked not to be said publicly and promised as such,
Then,
Well-
if I might then, why aren't we discussing this in closed session?
Amen.
No, I don't think we necessarily need to, but my question is, if that is your,
I feel like that we can craft, and it has been proposed and validated that it's a legal method to discuss this in open session, allowing for the maximum allowable amount of transparency without, flying in the face of a commitment that's been made to them.
then you don't need, I don't know that you'll convince me, and you don't have to, I guess is my point, right? If we want to proceed, then let's proceed, right? Then that's fine, right? But again, I don't want to derail the entire process.
Mr. Ayers, what's your thoughts down there?
Well, I agree with Matt. We've been through enough crap here in the last 3 months. We don't want to get any more problems. So we want to do this thing as easy as we can and as transparent as we can. To come up with a solution, I don't know. I say we pick 3 people out of the bunch we have right now and go that route.
Do you have
Tonight
your
or
3?
tomorrow?
Well, I don't know. They have to get this thing done tonight. I don't know. Do you think one more day is going to hurt?
Sorry, Amy, could you come up to the
Amy?
microphone?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry to bring you up here, but
Amy Sell is with the agency that is assisting us with our talent search.
Good evening. My concern about delaying it a day is that the image that it would give council, and it would be a change in a timeline during a very exciting but also stressful time for candidates. It would impact, as was mentioned, the travel schedule and the initial feeling and rapport that they might get. It is a kind of war for talent out there, and I think everything we can do to woo the candidates and make them feel comfortable in the process is supported by me.
I respect all of that, but I think our concern has to be this body before even the commitments that we've made in the candidates. I'm sure we can work something out, but honestly, we have to consider the impact this will have on us first and foremost.
we got 7 candidates, obviously. Okay, now, have you've done this before with at least 7 or 8 people, I'm assuming?
Yes, I've done this twice when we had 7 candidates. One body whittled it down to 2, one whittled it down to 3.
Okay, 'cause we got great information. We know everybody's history. We know everybody, in their 15-minute interview with us. Is it rational for 7? We're going to be here all day to do this. So.
But it does sound like a few of you have shortened the list. So it might make sense to kind of indicate which candidates you are inclined to pursue using maybe the first initial of the last name as a way to indicate, and if there is consensus around 3 candidates, maybe that would be a way to all feel comfortable with moving forward with a smaller number. If everyone has very different opinions on who they would like to get to know, maybe that will help inform the group on interviewing all 7. Those might be ways to get additional information for your decision-making process tonight.
Mr. Haberman, you had something you wanted to add?
I don't know, I just was thinking that if each of you ranked your candidates 1 to 7 and provided that to Ms. Sell, the lowest number, and make it, say you want to interview 3 or 4, would be where the majority, the lowest number. In other words, if all of you use the same person as 1, then you'd have a rank of 5, and that would be one of the top candidates to bring back. Just another possibility that, and then that way she could develop a consensus and invite. If you say 3, then it'd be the 3 who have the lowest numbers would be brought back in for interviews.
And I could even maybe gather this information, do this right now and provide it back before making any decision to ensure that council feels like they have control of the process.
So, to be devil's advocate, us ranking them and handing to her isn't being very transparent upon who we're deciding that we're going to support.
Seems like a secret ballot situation.
Absolutely.
Potentially.
It is.
Same decoder.
But how are we going to discuss it if we
Well,
can't discuss it?
We've
out
gotten
in the
legal
open?
opinion that we can assign a code to these people, use their initials, and discuss them in that manner. I mean, we've had, 2 attorneys say that that's a permissible manner, plus Mr. Haberman has anecdotally said that he's seen it used in other councils.
Then do it. Like, then just, I mean,
So then we need a motion.
Let's get it done.
We need a motion on,
Madam Mayor, I make a motion, well, we need a roll call on the other motion.
for discussion.
Yep.
roll call, please.
Councilmember Milan,
Yes.
Councilmember Moffett,
Yes.
Councilmember Albrecht,
Yes.
Mayor Woolley,
Yes.
Councilmember Ayers.
Yes, thank you, Amy.
Well, no, so,
Madam Mayor, I make a motion that we have a discussion of the candidates that were presented to determine who we should bring in for an interview on the 14th using the candidates' initials as opposed to their full name.
Last initial?
The last initial is unique enough?
yes.
Okay, so last initial.
No support.
Make another motion then.
No,
Support? We need support.
we need support. I think it died on the vine, Howie. I said it died on the vine.
I divide them.
So if anyone else would like to make a new motion?
I mean,
Gotta
I
figure out what we're
hate,
gonna
I hate
do.
to see this body paralyzed like this, right? So, I believed that we were going, I believed that the OMA provided for a review of applicants in a closed session. Now, it provides further review, but legal opinion has been provided to us, and case law has proven that we cannot call out candidates in a closed session. The candidates who are presented to us in a closed session, we cannot make a decision about those candidates in a closed session. So apart from that, right, and apart from apparently us willing to discuss it here in a coded fashion, right, again, these are the 7 who have risen to the top. And I would prefer that we communicate, and again, this is all based on information that we have learned within the past, 24 to 48 hours, from the legal opinions that we've received. The plan for this process has changed in the past 24 to 48 hours, if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct.
So are you suggesting that we have a conversation in a closed session, which is much less transparent than how are we going to come to a consensus where we are representing the citizens by having had reviews these candidates and determining the ones that we feel are most worth everybody's time for bringing in time and money for bringing in for a finalist? I think that we need to be a little more decisive and come up with a plan tonight of how we're going to accomplish this.
Don't disagree.
Well,
I don't disagree.
I mean, or do we trust the agency that we've hired to say, you're going to give a recommendation for the 5 that you feel are the best fit?
That's a secret
and-
ballot, and it's less
No,
transparent.
no. I'm saying they make the recommendation as the
Relying upon your
professionals.
consultant.
They, instead of presenting 7, they present 5, which is I'm just putting that out there.
And
I
that's
think
who
we're
we
not doing our
interviewed,
jobs if
5.
we do that.
Pardon me?
And that's who we're going to interview, the 5?
Right,
Next week.
correct.
That's fine with me.
I mean, I will say this, all right? I would like our candidate to be happy with the salary that we've posted, right? As a body, we had determined that that was the salary we were going to post. Yes, we could get maybe a more experienced candidate for $140,000, or, right? But this is the range that we determined. And we have qualified candidates who have agreed to that range. Beyond that, I'm not sure that I'm comfortable with somebody who is or has retired and coming to be our city manager. I don't know that that's the stage where I want somebody to be entering into our city as our permanent city manager. Mr. Haberman, no offense intended.
I didn't ask for the job permanently.
Well, man, I mean, if Amy knows this, if we turn it over to her and we give us 5 candidates, we want the 5 candidates that's going to accept this kind of what we offer.
Well,
I'd be willing to make a motion on Mr. Albrecht's discussion.
I'd like to make a comment first. So, Matt, with all due respect, given the situation of our city, we're going to have pretty much all new staff almost everywhere, and I would not want to disqualify someone for the fact that they are retired, because they may bring with them the best experience and organizational value that we are going to need to rebuild this city at this point. If we're pulling new people in to various department heads, I think we should look at someone that has that, and I wouldn't cut them out because of that.
I'm not
We're
sure.
going to cut it down right now, because you're going to say, no one over that requested a salary increase, so that's one person, right? I don't think there were 2. I think it was 1. If we say that is, like, we can whittle the list right here, not even mentioning names if we do that. My request is nobody that is out of state that will require us to pay for airfare and lodging. So that's at least 1 more candidate. So where are we now? We're almost to 5, right? Or are we at 4? So we win and we're done, right? Is that what we're going for?
I don't think that the airfare and lodging should be, because we did a nationwide search and we can't then count someone out because we don't want to pay for airfare, then we should have just looked in Michigan. How dare we do a nationwide search and then say we're going to count someone out because we don't want to pay for their airfare? I mean, talk about...
Arbitrary thing, just like
But
it's
we shouldn't be
arbitrary.
making decisions on arbitrary things, and I think those are not arbitrary comments that Matt's making. They're very concrete things based on the character of someone who would, say, I'm going to apply for a job, but hey, give me more. I mean, I get that.
It's a common conversation, and you're an employment person. You tell us all the time. People always ask for greater than the salary that is posted. Not always, but it's not uncommon. Is it uncommon, Amy?
But it's a good criteria to take someone out because we established that we were going to pay this amount. Saying that we're not going to interview someone because they're out of state when we solicited candidates from out of state is setting such a horrible precedent for any of those candidates who are watching this.
Okay, so eliminating someone because they said they want to discuss a higher salary is also eliminating someone who may be willing to take a lower salary. They know what our rate is. They know what our posting was. They have not said, have they said they would not accept the job with the current posting? Are they open for negotiations? Will they work within that rate?
Yeah, we actually, the candidate that you're referring to, we did have a couple of conversations with him because at one point he was thinking about withdrawing if it wasn't going to be a good fit, but then he did feel comfortable accepting a salary at the high end of the range.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And this is why we need conversation, right here. That's an example of why we need conversation.
Don't disagree.
Sure.
Well, we're back to what are we going to do? What's the consensus on the process in general? Or do we just bring them all 7 in?
Well, so it was suggested during the workshop that we could have this round of interviews and then a second round of interviews after we've whittled that group down. I don't know how that's different from talking about these candidates publicly before bringing them in for an interview.
Because if you have 2 rounds of interviews, that means that you are having people take potentially 2 days off of their current job. And if you're interviewing someone out of state, you're talking about 2 trips in state.
So I guess my point is, I don't understand the difference of impact to our candidates' privacy or confidentiality if we say we're going to bring all 7 of you in for an interview, as opposed to we're going to talk about the 7 of you publicly.
Because their names, well, so if we bring all 7 of them in for an interview and then have a subsequent interview, number one, I mean, we can't effectively interview 7 people in one day. So it just, speaks to our inability to make a decision on the process. And I think that's what we're tasked with, is making a decision. And if we just bring in the 7 that the recruiting company picked for us, we're failing in our job, period. But then it also gives those candidates the illusion that they are being considered when they very well may not be. We've all looked at the information, and we have people that we want to interview and people we don't want to interview. You've already explained that for reasons that you've decided that we should weed people out. So I think that, going ahead and bringing them in so that we can say their names publicly is doing a disservice and just not putting a good face on us.
Well, yeah, I'm just going to go back. At this point in time, if this body can't decide on how they would whittle these out this evening, it's a moot point to come back tomorrow based on what Ms. Sell's experience and recommendation was. And her recommendation was that we then bring all 7 back next Thursday. And I guess if this body can't come to an elimination agreement this evening, that we should make a motion to use her recommendation of interviewing all 7 next Thursday. So there's either a motion that we can all, carry, or we'll just go with Ms. Sell's recommendation and interview all 7 next Thursday publicly.
Okay. All the work that they did, Amy Sell, we've looked at 7 candidates. I say we interview all 7 in one day. We'll just do the best we can and what we got.
Anybody support that motion?
Was that a motion?
No, sorry.
Sure, there'll be a motion.
So you're proposing that all 7 come next?
Yeah, if we can't come to a solution here, we got to do something instead of sitting here all night long trying to figure what the hell we're going to do. So let's just do it, sorry. But I mean, let's give the benefit for the 7 people that that they did pick out. 7 out of 100 people, that's a lot of people. So, and I think we owe it to them people.
Mr.
I ask-
Kingsup, do you want to make a comment?
I'm going to ask a question of Amy. And I'm only relying from my own past experience, so I'm seeing whether you verify or disaffirm it. When I've been involved in this before, there may have been 4 or 5 that came in for interviews. And just in that process, it became very apparent that with some, the interviews were very short, others were a little long. And so you couldn't gauge that there was going to be an equal amount of time for each candidate. In this instance, they have the documentation in the background already that was, as described to me, very comprehensive and very thorough. So it seems to me that the council has the basic input and background to really focus on where they want to focus with each particular candidate. And it would seem to me that, and I'm going to refer to it as an interrogation process, which results in an evaluation, it seems to me that can go fairly quick because of the element of information they already have, the thought process they're going to refine when they come before and they ask questions. And I think collectively, the process may go very quickly. Now, am I wrong in that analysis?
I would recommend allocating 1 hour per candidate. I do think that given, it's not like people are going to be coming in fresh. So I think it will be a very efficient process. It'll be a long day and a long evening, but I think there's a possibility that there might be it might be easier to come to a decision. You might not need to have second round interviews because you will have had a lot of body of knowledge to get ready. You will then get to meet them when in the interviews. You'll get to see them interacting in a reception. You'll be getting lots of input from the public and the interviewers. I would think there'd be a very good chance of being able to make a decision after this very long day. But so that's.
Was it your
sometimes.
recommendation that we interview 7, or do you recommend that we cut that down?
Given where we are, where it's difficult to have a very candid discussion because of the considerations that have been discussed, in an effort to make sure that every candidate that could be the right fit for your community gets that opportunity, this would be my recommendation. I do think it's onerous. It's ideal if there can be consensus where everybody feels comfortable that a small number of people come forward, that you can focus on them. But given the alternatives that are here, I do think that bringing everyone in would be a good way to make sure everybody's voice is heard, but also gives the candidates confidence in the process that we've laid out to them.
I agree with that. I think it'd be very positive, and because you are really giving a complete opportunity to these individuals that have been recommended, and they can't fault the process because they're all going to be heard and evaluated. And that's what you want to be sure of, is that the public knows that you've gone through a very complete process and a thorough process in vetting as best you can to make this very important decision. Because the community is going to look at this as a very important decision for them in the next leadership role from an administrative standpoint. And I think going through this onerous process is going to be to your benefit.
I think we're also being negligent with the funds that it's going to cost to bring all these candidates in, when it's very likely that we all might have a consensus that some of them aren't even ones that we want to consider.
Duly noted.
And I just wanted to point out that the process that was proposed to us, we received a legal opinion very recently that process is not compliant with state law. So that's where this conversation is arising from. Just so everybody knows, that's why this process that we thought we might have had was the opinion was that it was not compliant with state law. So as a result, we are in this position. The process that we had planned on, right, was.
But we were given a process that was compliant based on 2 attorneys by which we could have a discussion and come to a reasonable consensus so that we would express our opinions based on the body of knowledge we have about these candidates, not waste anyone's time or the city's resources bringing in people that none of us at the end of the day are interested in pursuing as a candidate. We can do that. We've gotten 2 legal opinions that we can do it.
But I guess to respect both opinions, I think we're at an impasse that you're not going to convince enough people to agree with a process this evening to eliminate any of our candidates. I recognize the fact that we may incur an expense that may or may not be valid, but at this point in time, there wasn't a consensus enough to whittle that down. So I would like somebody to make a motion that we will. Oh, did Howie make the motion officially, Victoria?
He did.
So we need support in regard to just interviewing all 7 next Thursday. Did we have support?
If we could, is it possible to repeat the motion, please? Is that?
Mr. Ayers, the motion, or Victoria, do you have the motion on the table there, please?
I have that is to bring in all 7 candidates on March 14th for an interview for the city manager position.
Support.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Moffett?
No.
Councilmember Albrecht?
Yes.
Mayor Woolley?
Yes.
Councilmember Ayers?
Yes.
Councilmember Milan?
Yes.
And the motion carries, so we will be interviewing 7 candidates next Thursday evening. Throughout the day, there will be a schedule provided. The city council, as well as individuals of staff and other representatives of the community during the day process. And then next Thursday evening, there will be a community reception from 5 to 7, so that the community will be able to get a chance to meet the candidates, ask them some questions, and then be able to give feedback to council through the Amy Cell agency.
If we're going to have 7 candidates, I think with the community reception needs to be longer than 2 hours.
Let's play it by ear, see how it works out.
Good plan.
Instead of making all these rules.
We have to give notice.
I would think that it's probably doable if we need to extend our time in the community room. We would be able to do that. I'll bring extra juice.
And when will this begin, when will the scheduling begin?
It's 5 p.m. is the time of the reception.
8:30, yeah.
8:30. Oh, that meeting is public in the community room, I believe, and there will be a schedule posted as that information is available. So the public is welcome to come and take a look during that interview process.
For an hour each, 7 times.
I believe that was the last.
New business, public.
I'm sorry, is this 8:30 in the morning we're talking about, or 8:30 in the evening?
8:30 in the morning.
Oh, in the morning. Okay, because I was sitting here thinking 3 a.m. Thank you for the clarification.
Okay.
Whoa.
The next item on the, we took roll call on that, right?
I
Yes,
did.
We're good. The next item on the agenda is new business. Any new business to share?
I'd like to say one thing. I'd like to send my condolences out to the one of our oldest business owner in Clawson with the Alexopoulos. Greg passed away 2 days ago, and they were burying him today.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
So,
Anything else? The floor is now open for public discussion. The floor is now closed for public discussion.
Madam Mayor, move we adjourn.
second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Albrecht?
Yes.
Mayor Woolley?
Yes.
Councilmember Ayers?
Yes.
Councilmember Milan?
Yes.
Councilmember Moffett?
Yes.
Great night, everyone. Thank you very much.